Hi. Oh shit. There we go. How's everyone doing? Welcome. I'm not dead. I've been around. Those of you who are on my server know that I've been around. Those of you who aren't in my server, I guess have presumed that I'm dead or have been dead. But I'm alive. I'm very well alive, and that's very cool. I love being alive. Being alive is really fun. I am here for some Draft League Academia. We haven't done this in a little bit, but I did promise I would do it, and I still have some questions from last time I want to answer, and then I also have some new questions that some people have put in my server literally just in the past couple of minutes. So we're going to try and get to as much as we can and do some education. The fucking professor is back. But first, I'm going to put on some fucking jams because I think it would be cool to have a little bit of background music. So let me start this real quick. I got so hyped at the intro that I kind of forgot about the whole, like, having to, you know, do the whole background music type things. Pokemon lo-fi. Let's lo-fi it out. Apparently there's a lo-fi Pokemon radio, and that's pretty cool. Oh, look at that. Alright, I'm going to turn it down a bit. Let me know if the music is too loud or too quiet. Keep me posted. Let me know. How's that feeling? How we doing? How's the music feeling? Give me some yeses, give me some nos, give me some ups, give me some downs. But how's everyone's like fall been? I haven't done this since like September, so yeah. I don't think I've done this since I actually finished my dissertation, so that's pretty cool. Hi, Thriller. Hello, Maya. Hello, Young Citrus. Hello, Vepsis. Hello, Rogue Rodum. Hello, J. Ricky. Hello, Frandy. Hello, Cryptid. Anna. Hello, Maya. Did I already say hello, Maya? Oh, I should turn it up a bit, someone says. Well, I will. I'll do just that. Don't you worry. Alright, I've turned it up to about negative 35 decibels. Or is that's not how that works. Whatever OBS says negative 35 is. Okay. Hello, Phony. How are you? Yeah, how's everyone's like falls been? How's everyone's lives been going? I hope everyone's been having some good times. Fall kind of sucked. I'm sorry to hear that. There's a lot of people in the server who have had kind of difficult past couple of months, so I guess maybe it was a little unfair of me to ask that, but I hope everyone's days goes. My couple past months haven't been like the most perfect anyway either, so you know, it happens. I'm getting a little bit of buffering, so let me try and handle that really quick. And then I promise we will get on with it. I just want to make sure that we are maximizing our everything. 1 second. Apparently it's green now. I've been lying. Is stream health poor right now? Alright, yeah. Let me vibing out. I don't know why it's doing this. Maybe if I remove this. That could do something. I just saw Phony's question. Give me a sec. Sorry, here we go. Okay. Let me try to do like not a live stream of lo-fi. See if this helps. Are we back? Okay. I think the actual issue was, I think the actual issue is that I was doing the live stream for the music, so that was taking up a lot of like data on Chrome. So I think we're good. I'm gonna sit here for a sec and just make 100% sure, but it seems like everything's going okay. Knock on wood. Okay, now we back. Anything? Any issues? I think we're okay. You wanna see my nails? I got fucking long ass nails. How fun is that? Fucking dope, isn't it? Got some fucking talons. I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm just a silly girl. I'm being very silly. I also look atrocious today, so please excuse that. Okay. I didn't mean to be on that one. Now we're on that one. Look at that. Okay, so hey, Addison, you silly goober. Let's put that over there, please. And that over there. Okay, so things are better now, and that's really cool. Glad I figured out the issue. I did the Wi-Fi extender thing. I bought a Wi-Fi extender, which meant that I thought that I'd be fine in terms of I thought that I would be fine in terms of internet and things, but I think what it was is it was just I was doing the other live stream for the music, which was just taking up too much stuff. So anyway, we have some viewers, we have some likes. If you haven't liked the stream, give it a like to give it a little bit more support and a little bit more visibility. Who got here while I was doing stuff? Petra, hello Petra. Dee Dee, hello Dee Dee. And I think that's it. Young Citrus, hello. Holding myself from making the comment I want to make about those nails. They do look amazing. I know what comment you're thinking, and yes, unfortunately, can't do anything. Yes. Okay, well, we're here. We're here for Draft League Academia. Sorry that took a little while. I probably should have figured that out sooner, but now I know. You know what I mean? So what was I talking about? Everyone's days. I hope everyone's days is going well. Let's just get into it, because I feel like I'm stumbling over my words. I feel like I'm being a bit silly right now, and I think I just need to get into like some draft league ranting to really like be able to say words properly, if you know what I mean. So I'll keep my eye on the chat as well, so if you have any questions as I'm explaining things, feel free to let me know. But I'm going to start at where we left off. We were talking about cores last time, and we went on a very sort of like long dive into finding sort of like initial 2 draft picks that are really strong. So something really cool about that is I did that stream, and then I helped Daria, who, if you don't know her, she's another trans draft league player who I've been helping in PPL's D League. And I used some of the cores that we found in the last Draft League Academia to help her draft her team for PPL, and she's finished the top seed in PPL with Miascarada Iron Treads. So that was a really cool team that I helped her draft, and I have been helping her do some builds with as well. So yeah, I don't know why I'm going on this tangent, but if you haven't checked that out, go check out Daria's videos. I always like share them on my like community post sections. So I'm not in it, but like the builds are often mine. So if you want to see some Addie builds coming into play, take a look at some of her stuff. But I'm going to go immediately to the next question we left off on, which is, what are some Pokemon that you think are egregiously over or underrated in Draft League? So this is purely more of an opinion question, which is cool. And I'm definitely down to answer it, but I'm going to be kind of brief with it. I don't want to like linger upon it too long. I think some of the mons that are overrated in Draft League are, well, it's difference, right? Because there's mons that aren't necessarily overrated as much as they are, I just don't like them personally, and those can be 2 separate things. So like one specific example is Ponytail. Ponytail hates Zarude and thinks it's one of the worst Pokemon ever. The reality is it's just one of those Pokemon that like Phony can't use very well, and there's tons of Pokemon that I can't use very well either, and that is what it is, you know. I need to reconnect. Whoopsie. So one of the Pokemon that I can't use very well at all is Rillaboom. Like, I use Rillaboom atrociously, and I've just never been able to use it well, and I've never been able to like make it work. There's plenty of other mons that I haven't been able to make work as well, but let me give some like broad ones that I think, instead of using the terms overrated or underrated, the best terms to use are maybe overused or underused, or over-considered. So one of the first mons I'm seeing as I'm just like scrolling down the Pokemon Showdown thing is Corviknight. I think a lot of people draft Corviknight thinking, especially in this generation, that it's going to be the mon that it was in Gen 8. It definitely won't be. Corviknight's pretty much only utility this generation is to defog and U-turn. Power creep has gotten so far up that like Corviknight can't really do much other than that. So it can come in and remove, and since it's such a hazard-centric meta, defog is valuable, but it's not valuable for 15 points. 15 points is not worth defog and U-turn. There are plenty other mons that can defog and U-turn, but more importantly, like, you can just put boots on your mons. Like this, it's setup fodder. It doesn't take hits like it used to. You can't really pressure stall this gen. Like, it's just not really it. Plus, if you're, assuming you're facing one mon that can always Terra on the other side of things, like, it's gonna be some Terramon that's just gonna like blow Corviknight back. So Corviknight, I think, is a mon that is bait, I think is what some people call these things, bait. Or fraudulent is the other word that I've heard used to describe these mons. Mons that sort of, on paper, look like they can do something, look like they have utility, but in practice don't really do what they set out to do, or appear like they can do. I'm hearing some people mention Mandibuzz. I helped Nexus recently in his league, and he had Mandibuzz. It was fine, but it wasn't worth 15 points, which is what he got it for. Mandibuzz is probably worth 10 points, and Corviknight's probably worth 11. So that's a thing. Other overrated Pokemon. Iron Bundle, I think, is incredibly overrated Pokemon. I think there's a lot of people who, when it came out, thought it was going to be like the most broken thing ever. Having to rely on 80% accurate Hydro Pumps is pretty terrible, but that's not the argument you use to justify it. The argument you use to justify it is that, like, it just is really predictable. It only does one thing, and it doesn't do that one thing reliably. It's really just a demon when your opponent has quite an Ice Weak team, but when they don't, it just kind of doesn't matter. So I think that's another mon that I would consider like a really big fraud mon. Other mons I dislike or think isn't that good. Walking Wake. I think people really rated Walking Wake when it first came out. I think it's like 15, 14 pointer maybe. I don't even think it's like that. I think, again, it's really predictable. Roaring Moon. That's another one. I think when Roaring Moon came out, people thought it was like insane, and it was not. You know, people are like, oh, it has knockoff. No, it doesn't matter. It just, it's too frail, and without Terra, it's honestly not that good. And Dragon Dark isn't even that great of a typing, so I'm not a big fan of Roaring Moon either. But I think the more interesting part of the question is what mons I think are underrated. So underrated, I think, are mons that are just low tier mons that you get a lot of utility out of. So the one mon I've been super high on lately is Eldegoss. I think Eldegoss is like a 2-3 point mon that's incredible, and just does the one thing it needs to do very effectively, which is regen stall, sit, and spin. It's an incredibly reliable spinner, and it's not punished by ghost types as much because of the grass type, which can hit relatively hard, and leaf storms from Eldegoss hit really hard. And then Leech Seed, which is a great punish, as well as like Sleep Powder and Stun Spore. Like, spin blockers have to be super wary about that. When you pair it with something like Slowbro or even like Alomomola, Eldegoss is like a really, really strong low tier pick. Other cool low tier picks that I think are underrated. Diancie, I don't know if I'd call this underrated, but I don't see it drafted as often as I think it should be. Azelf. Azelf's another mon that I find quite underrated. I think a lot of people just don't draft it because it's hard to fit on teams, but it's kind of fucking cracked, so I'm big on it. Other ones I find underrated. It's tough, right? Because what do you consider underrated? One mon that I consider overrated that I tried in my one Wi-Fi league is Tatsugiri. I know some people think it's like fucking broken or like such a great low tier. I don't. I didn't find much use with it. I'd rather have an Eldegoss. Orthworm, I think, is another one that's kind of overrated. What's underrated? Okay, Probopass is underrated. Let me sell you on Probopass, because I actually genuinely love Probopass. I said I wouldn't spend too much time on this, so I'm what the fuck? Hold on. Hold the phone. Beautiful Tritor. There we go. So I've used Probopass in a tournament. It was pretty good. It gets up rocks pretty reliably, and it can slow Volt Switch out. That's pretty much all you need from it as a 2-pointer. And then I believe I also used it as like a max speed Bootsmon. Look, I'm not saying this is incredible. I'm just saying I think it's great and underrated. Perugly is another mon that I really like. Regice is another mon that I really like. I mean, I'm just naming mons at this point, but ultimately it's all up to personal preference. Like, I think there are mons that are fraud mons, and I think there's mons that like beat players who are a little bit more inexperienced, and those mons are like mons like Chi-Yu or mons like Iron Bundle or mons like Espathra, right? Like things that are kind of just like these really strong like setup mons, but like ultimately if you have enough experience in the game, you know how to go about beating these things. But it might be a mon you have to lose to 2 or 3 times first, but once you do, you're fine. So it's a tough question to answer because it's all my personal preference. I don't necessarily think like some mon this gen has been like horrifically over or underrated, with the exception of maybe like Bundle. I could look at like a tier list and see, but that seems like a larger video in itself. Does everyone feel satisfied with some of my answers about this? Let me look at some of the comments. I'll see what I agree with and don't agree with. Eldegoss believers, Rotom fan. I'm a huge Rotom fan proponent. I love Rotom fan. I think it's a great low tier, and especially when you need an electric type and your team is getting a bit ground weak, your draft is getting a bit ground weak, Rotom fan is a great pickup. Lake Trio is great. I think that's the thing with Azelf is that Uxie and Mesprit are highly rated, and I think Azelf isn't very highly rated. No Rain Floatzel is underrated. I would have to see that. I used No Rain Floatzel in a low tier league, and it did quite a bit, but not more than I would have expected it to do. Knuckle Stack is a mod that I don't necessarily understand, to be honest with you. It seems fine. Knuckle Stack seems pretty good. I think I just struggle to find matchups in which Knuckle Stack is like better than other mods on a team. You know, to do like the cursed Salt Cure thing. I feel like Knuckle Stack fits on teams that have been really shit at picking up better rockers. Tinkaton, I don't think is underrated. I think it's as rated as it should be. Tentacruel I've never really liked. Yeah, all right, those are my takes. Hopefully that's satisfying. But yeah, let's keep going. Next, we have a question from Killaboom or Danny. When building your team, what are things you look at first in a matchup? Do you look at what offensive mons win for you or what threats they have and start a game plan from there? Sometimes I have trouble starting the build and having a vision of a game plan. I know it can depend on the type of matchup for sure. So I think this is a huge question. Oh, have a good night, Simply Kobe. I think this is a super important question and one that separates really strong draft league players from ones that are a bit can struggle a bit. I think something that a lot of draft league players at some point in their draft league career have to grapple with is playing, or not playing, not drafting, not playing, but building in a way that is not reactive but pushes the offense. And the way that I would probably go about describing this is, you know what, I'll show you a matchup. And it's really unfortunate because they deleted replays, so I can't actually show you how this game went as much as I can talk about it. So I would love to show you this replay because it's one of my favorite games I've ever played. But let's look at this matchup that I just had recently. I will have to do a little bit of adjusting. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I can do this. Let's do that. And let's do hello. Okay. Let's do that. So this is a matchup I played recently in the Smogon Team Tour. And it was a really, really tough matchup because I kept looking at the team that I had, which is a good team, and I found myself in a situation where Kyurem, Kartana, Zeraora, I just could not switch into these mons reliably, right? So let's look at Zeraora for a second. Roselia is the defensive answer, but ultimately, like, Zeraora sets up some bulk ups, I'm dead to Blaze Kick. Versus Piloswine, Zeraora sets up some Calm Minds, I'm dead to Aura Sphere. You could say bring both, and then, one will beat the Calm Mind set, one will beat the bulk up set, but you're spreading your options too thin then. So I started building a team very reactively, essentially. I had a very reactive build for this matchup, and I'll show you what the build was. I need to grab it really quick, but I'll show you what the build was. Let's find it. But I mean, it's important to look at this because ultimately, is this it? Yes. Okay. So this was a bit of an initial build. and you can see it here. The idea with this initial build was, look, I had the defensive Roselia to take on things like Zera Aura. I had the Dragonite, which was geared towards beating the Kartana specifically. But if, you know, the Assault Vest Scrafty was geared towards beating the Kyurem. There was a lot of defensive pieces coming together. But ultimately, you look at this matchup, I'm getting overwhelmed. Even if I have one defensive answer to every single offensive piece, they're just not good enough defensive answers. And in this particular matchup, Roselia, Scrafty, and Dragonite do not core together as well as they might in another matchup. And I just had to realize that through mocks, as every turn I was reacting to a move that my opponent was using rather than dishing out offense myself. So I ultimately came to the conclusion that I need to push a more offensive team build. And I think this is a real, like, big important thing for Draft League players to realize, is that if you start a building process by just saying, okay, first mon on the team, what's my switch into Kyurem? First mon on the team, what's my switch into Zera Aura? You're not thinking about it right. The first question you need to go for is, A, how am I winning? So I identified pretty early in the matchup that I was winning through a Swords Dance Rock Polish Cavalion. I felt that Megahorn plus CC, the entire team, that's really cool. How do I accomplish that goal? Well, I have two sort of broad ways to do that. Choice number one is to pivot around, you know, go for spikes, go for T-spikes, sort of defensively maneuver myself where my opponent is sort of slowly whittling itself over time as they try to break my defensive pieces. The other option is to just go far on the offense, try and bring out the counters as much as humanly possible, the counters to Cavalion, and, you know, destroy them so that Cavalion can, you know, win in the end. And ultimately, I decided to do the latter strategy because I just didn't have the ability to be able to, you know, be defensive in this matchup. There was just too much going on that it was too difficult. So I'm going to show you the team that I actually did come up with, and it's an incredibly offensive build. And some people could look at this build and say, well, where's your switch into this? Where's your switch into that? I didn't have a switch into anything, y'all. I was playing a strategy called no switch offense, which is quite literally, I never switched once during the actual game that I played. I just attacked what's in front of me, and I won this game, and it sucks that I can't show the replay of it. But the idea behind the team was to lead Weakness Policy Dragonite and just start firing off huge power damage, like Hurricane, Scale Shot, Thunder, Iron Head. Hit everything. If they lead Diancie, fucking nuke that shit. If they lead Kyurem, like, I live a Ice Beam through multi-scale, get my Weakness Policy, Scale Shot that shit. Like, I had a plan for everything. And oftentimes in team building, the next thing you think about after thinking about, okay, what's my win con? What am I winning with? Is to think about the beginning of the game. Like, what is the best opening for you to achieve that goal? And then you can start figuring out the middle. And for me, the thought was, okay, the best way that I can open the game is by forcing my opponent to react as immediately as possible, bring out his defensive pieces as much as he can, and bait them out and do a lot of damage to them. So I needed Kyurem, for example, to take some damage in order for me to kill it with close combat without any attack boosts. So the Dragonite set does that. I needed Slowbro to take some damage. With Thunder, Dragonite set does that, you know? So I wanted to craft a dedicated lead that got enough progress done so that I can just, you know, clean up the rest in the mid game, finish the rest of the chip that I needed in the mid game for Cavalion to win in the late game. And you need to build like that. You need to build thinking in three parts. At least that's how I do it, which is, what's my opening? What's my desired end game? And how am I connecting those two? And I know that sounds really difficult to do, but ultimately it's not, because once you have the winning set and the opening set, you can kind of just meld the rest, right? So what else is going to exist? What do I need defensive pieces for? What do I need offensive pieces for? Do I need a Scarfer to revenge things once, you know, this mon takes down this mon? It's less thinking about what's my immediate one-to-one switch in for Kartana, what's my immediate one-to-one switch in for Kyurem. I think it's more about crafting a story in your team building, which is a little hokey, but that's how I do it. So that's a bit of an answer. So this was the first piece, you know, click a bunch of buttons, get Pokemon whittled down as much as possible. Ideally, trade 1 for 1. Then, I'd go into Scarf Victini, click Final Gambit, trade another one for another one. Start breaking this team apart, right? Force a 4v4. And then from there, go into Piloswine, get rocks up, go into Scrafty, start Dragon Dancing to bait out things like Slowbro, or bait out things like Diancie or Eldegoss, which could otherwise take on one hit from Cobalion. And, you know, just keep going into the setup mons after the previous one dies, and ultimately leave Cobalion as the last mon standing to try and set up and win. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's really about identifying what your desired endgame is. It doesn't even need to be your win con. What is your desired endgame? Because your win con could be to eliminate, like, win cons and desired endgames are two different things. And I think that's another thing that people don't fully always understand or know. Like, this was my desired endgame, this Cobalion, but win cons are things you identify during the game. So my win con for Cobalion to win was to get Slowbro past a certain percentage, or get Slowbro dead. It was to, you know, get X amount of damage off on Kyurem, or to, you know, eliminate this other mon. That's your win condition. And you have to identify that both during the actual game, you know, when information is revealed to you, but also in the team building process. I think a lot of people also look at matchups and say, well, I want to win with, you know, my Flame Charge Arcanine, but, you know, Toxapex exists, so I can't do it. And you need to consider the fact that there are countless ways that you can bait out and kill a Toxapex. So you craft a team that does just that. Just because there's one mon that stands in the way of a set doesn't mean you shouldn't build a team around it. After that, it's just about mocks. But if you're building in a way where you're like, okay, this is my matchup. Okay, what's my Kyurem? My Kyurem is Scrafty. Okay, here's AV Scrafty on the team. My Kartana answer is Dragonite. Okay, well, here's defensive Dragonite on the team. You're not really like crafting a route to victory. You're just crafting short-term solutions, and those are not very successful, especially in higher level competitive play. So, yeah, perhaps I ought to like do a Draft League Academia where I quite literally build a team live. And maybe that would help, but I'm not going to do that today. But maybe for the third one. Yeah. All right. That's a little bit of advice. The TLDR of it is build smartly. Don't build reactively. Because if you build reactively, you're just going to be switching into things over and over until you lose, especially this generation where like offense is the name of the game. I would like to know how to best decide a lead on preview. I always seem to get them wrong and put myself behind early as a result. So this goes in what we were just talking about. I personally believe that you should never enter a draft league game without knowing what your lead is. Now, it's possible, especially in, you know, like 12 mon formats rather than 8 mon formats, that you have conditional leads. You could be saying, okay, I'm going to lead Azelf unless, you know, a Selgor comes. And if a Selgor comes, then I'm going to lead my anti-Selgor mon or whatever. But ultimately, I think it is smart to always have dedicated leads before any draft league game. And that's one, to reduce that chance of not knowing on team preview. And two, so you're always in the position at the start of the game where you are pushing the narrative of what's going to happen in the match. Because if you're immediately throwing out a mon and reacting, then your opponent's controlling all the turns that are going on. So you want to make sure you're starting with a lead that is productive for you. There's multiple different types of leads that you can consider in that role. So there's a hazards lead, right? So let me find an example of a hazards lead. Very basic hazards lead could be very basic hazards leads could be what? Let's just use Glamora. Yeah, very basic hazard lead. Like, you could be leading hazards with stealth rocks and then a bunch of other moves, and that's your way to win, and that's fine. Or you could be leading a mon that is dedicated to essentially 1v1 any possible counter lead. So, for example, this Diancie was built in a matchup. I will pull up the matchup right now. So that no matter what my opponent led, I was going to be okay. And oftentimes that's the best way to consider your leads, because it means you're not thinking from the get-go, which is really nice. All right, let me show you the matchup. So let's take a look at this one. So this was a matchup in the team tour as well. And I was really struggling to figure out how I wanted to lead. And I was thinking, okay, maybe I just lead Landorus and get some rocks up and whatever. But there's a lot of issues to that, right? I could struggle with the fact that the opponent could lead with Latios, like a choice specs Latios, and just kill me with Draco. Urshifu could lead and just click Surging Strikes. So all these possible things. So I crafted this Diancie lead. And you might be saying, hey, Addison, you silly goose. You don't, lead perfectly into, Life Orb Excadrill with Earthquake, right? This dies, obviously, to that. Or, Banded Urshifu Rapid Strike with Surging Strikes. To some extent, you have to look at the matchup and feel confident enough to say, okay, Banded Urshifu with Surging Strikes is not going to come here, right? Banded Urshifu already isn't a very likely bring because of, Slowbro possibly being Rocky Helmet and taking those hits, or Blacephalon being able to outspeed it and revenge it. So, it's unlikely it comes in the first place, and even if it does come, it's not going to lead, right? Why would they lead when I have Slowbro as an immediate answer in the back? So, counting things that you think are unlikely leads, you want to consider all the possible leads. So what are his possible leads? It could be another category of potential leading, which I think is the weakest form of leading, but some people like it, is a pivot lead. So either a slow pivot where you could just teleport right away, or a slow U-turn right away, or a fast pivot where you can get off like a Specs Volt Switch immediately and just get immediate damage off and position into the best, situation you can. So that's like a third type of lead. But this Diancie in particular is able to lead into Coca, set up Trick Room, and then set up Stealth Rocks. Lead into Latios, same deal, set up Trick Room, and then go for Moonblast. And then the Berry allows me to take on variants of like Heavy Slam Tyranitar, or Iron Head Excadrill, or things like that. And it was crafted to take on like pads Urshifu. So this spread always lives a Adamant Surging Strikes from a non-boosting item of Urshifu Rapid Strike. So if he did Rapid Strike, if he did Surging Strikes, I would just take the hit and kill with Moonblast. That's pretty cool. And if he U-turns, then I just click Moonblast, and then I click Stealth Rock the next turn. So ultimately, this set was built to be able to deal with anything off lead, and that's really cool. So I think that's the strongest form of leads. But that's less of a trade one-for-one lead. That's more of an immediate pressure lead. So I would say let's categorize it in 4 terms. There's the hazards lead, which just sets up hazards and does as much damage as it can before it goes down or pivots into something else. There's the pivoting lead, which just gets off either a slow pivot or a really strong Volt Switch or U-turn, turn 1, and then repositions into a stronger mon. And then there's 2 forms of leads that I think are stronger than those 2. One is the apply as much pressure as possible, so it might not kill anything, but it might force out 2 or 3 mons, reveal information, things like that. I think the Diancie did that. Or you have a mon that quite literally just trades 1-for-1 with anything. And a mon that trades 1-for-1 with anything, you can actually find a video of my channel, which is my my quarterfinals game against Q, where I just led this Weakness Policy Arcanine, and it was guaranteed to take any hit from anything, including Cleaver and Stone Axe, and then KO back with any one of these hits after getting a Weakness Policy boost. And then I just immediately sacked it afterwards, so I just made it a 5v5, you know what I mean? And that can be important for your games too. So you want to have your lead crafted in the team building process and know that you're going to lead it when the actual game comes. It's not a decision you should be making on team preview. That's the answer. Hopefully that is useful. Build to win, not to not lose. Exactly. That's a great way to put it for the previous question. Build to win, not to not lose. You would much rather go for a strong offensive win con and lose 5-0 than just defensively pivot into anything and have no chance to win ever the entire game and like lose 1-0. Unless you're like shooting for differential or something. Front offices are good. Cleaver, Samurai, or Glamora. Yeah, those are examples of strong hazard leads. Lottie Twins, yep. I simply need something I can safely pilot while at the same time knowing how the team operates. Well, that's the thing. You gotta kind of have a narrative for your teams. So that's something you gotta sort of keep in mind as you play. All right, next question. Let me grab my phone really quick. Okay, next question. Holy heck, how's everyone doing? Should I be going, quicker on these questions? Am I okay taking the time that I'm taking to answer them? Has this been informative? Does anyone have any lingering questions? If not, make sure you give the stream a like. We have almost like 20 viewers, so give that stream a like. Transition fundraiser is still going on. I know that's been a long time thing, but that's in the description too. Hope you're enjoying it. We're just vibing. We're just talking. So let's keep going. Okay, Frandy, when you go to EV and decide you want to take a hit from a Pokemon, how do you decide which hit you do and don't prop for? It's a pretty easy question to answer, and I'm not going to linger too much on it. You pretty much just decide the hits that you think you're genuinely going to be taking, and that's something you decide from mocks. So, for example, this is a defensive Rotom Wash. And I guess this is like, not a very complicated EV spread, so it could change with complicated EV spreads. But this is a Rotom Wash, and it was purely dedicated to taking on Weavile in a certain matchup. I could have faced a Silvally Grass. I could have faced a, I believe there was a Latios on the opposing team, but Rotom Wash isn't staying in on those mons. So think, for your defensive mon that you're EVing, you need to think about what mons am I realistically ever staying in on, right? Like, and doing something significant back to. So you should really only be EVing for those mons. And then you should only be EVing for like the moves that mon is going to click, either predicting you to come in or on something else that, would bring or another move. So like if fucking what am I trying to say? If Latios, for example, or sorry, bad example, if Weavile clicks SD as I switch my Crobat into Rotom Wash, then I want to make sure that I'm living like a +2 knockoff or something. You know what I mean? So you want to be able to sure you account for the move that they click directly in front of you and the move that they click predicting you, but you also want to make sure you account for the move that they would click against something as you're bringing the actual counter in. Same thing for this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm only EVing, well, this is a bad example. You just have to realistically think about, like, what moves are actually getting clicked against you. I don't know. It's kind of like, that's kind of just the answer. I don't play, like, defensively a lot, so I don't have great, like, answers for you. Think about it. Okay. So this, wrong one. This Sarut was EV'd to live a banded Melmetal hit after rocks. It was EV'd to take, a +1 Drain Punch from Komodo. But it wasn't EV'd to live, a +2 Air Slash from Togekiss, because I'm never staying in on Togekiss this thing. So you just have to be like really realistic about the matchup. Like, don't EV for ridiculous things you're never going to stay in on. That's kind of the idea. There you go. That's the answer. What about offensive sets where I have about 100 EVs left over with? All right, yeah. So like, how do I do this? I don't want to reveal too much about my upcoming match. Well, let's say you have a Greninja, and you're taking on a... Let's say the one thing that revenges Greninja on the opponent's team is a fucking... Weavile. That's the only thing that, you know, revenges Greninja outside of a Scarfer. Let's say there's a Gardevoir on this team too, and like Gardevoir could be a thing. Or let's say there's like a fucking Goldango. Let's say there's a Goldango, okay? Let's say you're a Greninja and you're facing off against a Weavile and Goldango. And let's just assume you're only Torrent Greninja. Let's say this is Gen 8, which is the better gen. And you know, only need to put in like this number of EVs or something. I'm being purely hypothetical here. You have 96 leftover EVs, and the only thing that outspeeds you is Weavile. Just put that shit in defense. Like, literally just put that in defense. Like, don't think about the one thing that could revenge this fast mon and say, okay, are they a physical attacker? Like, what move are they going to hit me with? Let's EV in defense, right? Let's say, I'm not going to run the calc, but let's say Weavile Brick Break from, like, Choice, or from Life Orb does, like, you know, is a roll for no ball. But then, like, you know, if you have 84 defense, then it's, you know, not a roll. So you can EV for that, and then, like, throw the rest in HP for, you know, broader hits that you'd be otherwise taking. So think about what's revenging you, I guess, if it's an offensive set. You want to think about what's revenging you and EVing in ways where you can surprise live. Another example that was like relevant in a game was like Talonflame was the only mon that could revenge my Blacephalon, and I think it was like 20 defense EVs allowed me to live a Brave Bird from full. So even though I had like this, like instead of putting it in HP or anywhere else, I just put it in defense to like give me that boost from not dying to Brave Bird. So think about what's revenging you is really the idea. Yeah. That's kind of the answer. Oh, we got 24 fucking viewers. How's everyone doing? Be sure to give the stream a big like if you haven't, and we'll move on. All right, so we're in today's questions. So we got free Darkrai. I don't really know is the answer to the question. I don't know if I should free Darkrai. I mean, in like Gen 9, like the regional decks on Wi-Fi, maybe. I don't really have an answer because all these tier lists are different. Like everyone has a different, like, you know, threshold for what the top tier is. And it really just depends. Like Darkrai is always going to be one of those mons that's like a questionable ban or unban, just like Zamazenta, or just like Chien-Pao or Dragapult, or I think Kyurem Black will be the same this generation when it comes out, or Spectre. You know what I mean? It's always gonna be one of those that's questionable. There's never gonna be an immediate yes no question. It just depends what's in the rest of the tier list. My genuine take is that if Chien-Pao is allowed, Darkrai should be allowed. That doesn't mean that if Chien-Pao is not allowed, Darkrai should or shouldn't be allowed. I just think that Darkrai is worse than Chien-Pao. So if Chien-Pao is allowed, I think Darkrai ought to be allowed. That's my only take when it comes to the free or don't free Darkrai perspective. Because you think about Chien-Pao, right? And even though it has to hold boots, the speed buff is huge, and the ability is cracked. The ability to have priority, people are like, oh, Darkrai has more coverage, but Darkrai also has more things that wall it. Despite it having more coverage, because Ice Dark is just so fucking cracked. And people are like, well, Chien-Pao has to run boots. No, it doesn't. Just run Choice Band and win. Or just like be good at removing hazards, or, you know, don't let them get up. So Chien-Pao is one of those mons that really benefits from the offensive hazard-centric meta, and I think Darkrai a little bit less so because it doesn't have the priority, and it only has one stab, and things like that. So, and just stat-wise, I think, even though there's more green going on here, the ability makes the attack fucking cracked, and I just think Chien-Pao's a better mon than Darkrai. So, yeah, I think if Chien-Pao is ever allowed in a league, Darkrai ought to be. That's my opinion on it. Priority moves are often easy to EV for. I have Mega Beedrill right now, and due to an insane speed, I was able to EV enough to live a few priority moves on Keepmons. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you have Mega Beedrill, you want to live a Bullet Punch from Medgross, like, you can EV for that. Yeah. I mean, it's especially true on mons like Blacephalon that have, or like Mega Beedrill that have those really like small HP stats. Yeah, like those EVs give greater bulk increases. Does that make sense? Like, what am I trying to say? So, Alakazam. When Alakazam like boosts its defense, obviously this is still not a lot of defense, but like comparatively, like 100 defense EVs are probably like 10%, 15% less damage, whereas like 100 defense EVs on something like a Ceruledge is probably more like, you know, a 5% difference. So when you invest in defense, especially in these bonds with like really low health, like don't think that that is irrelevant. Like in terms of Blacephalon, like the difference between this and this is like a 50% roll to kill from Talonflame Spray Bird versus a, you know, 100% guaranteed chance to live. So really consider investing in these small defense stats because they can make big differences. Kieran Black will be a must ban. It's going to be one of the stronger Ubers this gen with loaded dice. I disagree. I think Kieran Black is bad. Ayo. I think we're allowing it in the new PPL actually, so that'll be fun. Okay, next question. And then after that, I gotta go to the bathroom. I gotta pee. All right, lot of some dumb questions here, like what makes Ponytail so good at Pokemon? Don't think so. How do I stop sucking? Just be better. Favorite low tier mons. We already kind of talked about this. I'll just give you some of my personal favorites as well. Guzzlord. Huge Guzzlord fan. Guzzlord's one of those mons that like you invest in these defense stats and oh baby, that shit goes crazy. Let me also look. Let me take a look at my like draft stats to kind of come up with some genuine like nice things to offer. But Guzzlord's a great low tier dark if you don't have a dark type yet. I guess that would just be for national decks relevant things, but still worth talking about. What else? Golbat. A lot of people clown on me for loving Golbat, but I think Golbat's fucking crazy with a Violate. Let me go to Nat deck so I can actually like show sets and stuff. I think like Super Fang, Taunt, U-Turn, Roost is super cool. 80 attacks, no scoff with like Brave Bird, Taunt, U-Turn, Roost, Brave Bird, Taunt, Defog. Like I've used Golbat a number of times in Draft League. Let's find out how many. Yeah, like 5 times. It's like Roost, Super Fang, Toxic, Taunt. I think I've won literally all of these games too. Roost, Toxic, U-Turn, Super Fang. Yeah, so you know it does one thing kind of, but it does that thing quite well. Just Super Fang and 90 speed is really nice. So that's a great low tier pick. What else do I suggest? I've been digging Golisopod. I think Golisopod's really dope. Just really good priority. Low tier spikes and momentum with emergency exit. Turtonator. Oh my god, Turtonator I love. I love Turtonator. That's just a me like loving this thing. But you know, it gets Rapid Spin now, which is cool, but you're never gonna run Rapid Spin. Turtonator has really cool niches against the Urshifus because of shell armor, so it can't like die to Wicked Blows and Surging Strikes, and that's really cool. So you can run defensive sets. But more importantly, like Shell Smash with Fire Dragon coverage is fucking cracked. Like, I almost swept Vepsis with this in Gen 8, which was cool. Omastar, sort of same thing, but the reverse. It can do that fun shell smashing thing, but it can also set up like hazards and toxic spikes and stealth rocks. It gets all 3, and it can also do really weird niche things like reflect type, which has actually come in clutch in a draft league game before, or run like defensive sets with like knockoff and scald. That's a really cool low tier pick that I wish more people used. Stunfisk, obviously, but I think people know that already. I'll give you one more. Let me see. What do I genuinely think? I mean, Scrafty I love. Scrafty's been carrying me so hard in some, the tournament that I'm in. So, but I think Scrafty's not really a low tier pick. What else to suggest? A Selgor? Does a Selgor count? I love a Selgor. Probably doesn't count. Rotom Fan we already talked about. That might be it. All right, let me give you one more. It's a little bit of a joke. It's a little bit of a joke suggestion. Actually, I'll give you a real suggestion. One real suggestion is Type Null. Type Null beats like most high tiers, which is insane, and it just rest talk slow pivots. It's like amazing glue for any team that's like a defensive or balanced team. And it just chews any hit, and it can't be struck by a crit, so even that won't fuck it up. So I've used it to wall side guards. I've, with Icy Winds, U-turn rest talk sets. I've used it to wall the Lotties. This thing can do a lot. My joke suggestion is going to be Seeking. I actually had a goated Seeking run the one time me and... actually, that's not true. Me and OG Albina have played, I think, 3 times. I don't think I've ever lost to him. But the one, two of the games that we played weren't very, serious games. One was on, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, so, it wasn't that serious. The one serious game we played in the league, I swept him with Seeking. So that's a thing. And I'm going to genuinely justify this, so give me a second. So one, Swift Swim. Swift Swim Seeking is real. 92 attack is awesome, and it genuinely has strong offensive capabilities. Drill Run, Flip Turn, Mega Horn, Knockoff. I believe in the game that I played Owen, I can just find the fucking set actually. Let's do this. I don't mean to do this to shit on Owen. I think Seeking's awesome, and he was the victim. Yeah, it was Waterfall, Knockoff, Ice Beam, Flip Turn, and his water resists were Jellicent and Celebi, so you just get knocked off, and Seeking goes crazy. Ice Beam then plowed through a Garchomp, so yeah, it gets Flip Turn and can thrive in Swift Swim. But the other niche thing about it is I played Kaz, who's an incredible player, and I walled him. He had both Rotom Wash and Zeraora on his team, and I walled him with a Rest Hog Lightning Rod set that just walled the Zeraora and walled the Rotom Wash. That's a real fucking thing. Just knock off Flip Turn, Rest Sleep Talk with Lightning Rod. You only have one weakness. That's real fucking utility there. So yeah, I love Seeking. And then I brought it in playoffs, and I lost to a crit in playoffs, and I would have won otherwise. But this, believe it or not, I'm talking about this mod a lot this stream, was my Blacephalon answer. AV Seeking took hits from Blacephalon pretty fucking decently. So it's real. I encourage someone to try Seeking. I'm the only person I've ever seen genuinely try it, and I loved it. I'd pick it up again, but I don't think it's in the new gen, which is so unfortunate. All right, that's my next suggestion. Why is Eldegoss the greatest grass type of all time? I already talked about that a little bit, but I'll talk about it again. It's fucking broken, and it pairs well with Slowbro and all this other stuff. With Leaf Storm and Leech Seed. Spin blockers can't spin block it that easily. How far should you predict your opponent's sets, and how much heat is too much? Those pretty broad questions, but how far should you predict your opponent's sets? Sorry. Okay. From Simply Kobe, how far should you predict your opponent's sets? I think use mock teams or use mocks as a reference for what could or couldn't come, but don't rule out things entirely unless they just don't make sense in the given matchup. But consider more sets to be likelier than others, I guess. So don't necessarily count sets out as much as you should, or and don't do the opposite either. Don't say this set is 100% guaranteed coming, because then you'll also find yourself in a world of hurt. But just bear in mind the ones that are more likely to come over others, and just be mindful of those during games. How much heat is too much? I answered this question in the last Draft League Academia stream, which was just heat should have a purpose, and it should be to bait out and surprise the opponent's intended answer to the mon. So, you know, if you are a Blacephalon and you think the answer is going to be like, I don't know, Chansey, and you bust out like, actually tricking would just be 100,000,000% better. So this is a terrible example. I don't know. If like you're a Venusaur and you think like a really defensive mon is going to come out or rather a really Spadef mon is going to come out like Florges. I don't know. Or Florges definitely wouldn't come out on a Venusaur. You think Hisuian Goodra is going to come out on Venusaur. Like Sword Stance Earthquake. Like you click Sword Stance on the Goodra coming in and then click Earthquake. That's a cool heat set. You know what I mean? Like it should have the intention of like baiting out a mon that should normally come in on it and surprising it with some kind of heat. And that's sort of the mentality behind heat. Like you shouldn't just bring it because, you know, there's no better thing. Let me see your palm. I can palm read. Who the fuck is this? Okay, fair enough. All right, let's do some more. Could you please convince Mr. Finch to let me use my precious Arceus bug and OU? No, I think that's crazy. Okay. The next one is Ponytails. Do you have any tips for resolving draft anxiety? I'm going to answer that once I go to the toilet. I'll be right back. I've returned. Wow, my hair's so fucked up and so messy. Could you tell I didn't leave the house today? Actually, that's not true. I got groceries. That's it. I've actually been having a rough... Wow, I look insane. I've actually been having a rough, like, day today. Rough 24 hours, let's say. But I won't go into detail too much about it. I'm just happy to be here with you all, and that's really cool. It's just really cool. All right, what's going on? We got some discourse. We have some some banter. Let's talk. We don't really even need the fucking team builder for this one. How not to get psyched out for games. Now, I'm going to say something. This thing is going to be controversial. But I'm going to say it. The games that I lose, especially games that I lose to players who I would say are not as strong players as me, and I know that's going to sound like a conceited thing to say, but we all lose to people who are worse players than us, and we all beat players that are better than us. So foundational understanding number one in terms of like getting more comfortable at the start of draft league battles is knowing that anyone can beat anyone. Any game you enter, you have as much of a chance of winning that game to the point of how good your team build is. But like ultimately, like you could even have a really bad team build and the opponent could have a really good team build, and it could just so happen by chance that like your team build matches up really good against theirs. So like anyone can beat anyone, and I've seen some novices of draft league beat some titans. It happens. So the first thing you need to understand is that anyone can beat anyone. Whenever anyone enters a game and says to me like, oh, I'm gonna lose, or I'm playing so-and-so and they're really good, odds are they're gonna lose that game. So the first thing you need to think about is just positive mindset, which is acknowledging that you have win equity before entering any game. You can win any game. Even if you're an imperfect player, you can win any game. It's fine. But you need to have a good mentality entering it, because if your entering mentality is, I'm playing a really good player, oh my god, they're going to make so many predictions and so many reads on me, I got to play differently, you're going to lose. Play how you would normally play anybody else. Which I know is hard to say, but like, you got to do it. And that's just something that takes practice. But in terms of like positive mentality and getting like in a good mentality before games so you're like less stressed, this is going to sound really crazy, but my friend Zazo recommended it to me, and it's actually a genius idea, and it just helped me get so good at Mons. It's kind of ridiculous, is to find a hype song that you just play for yourself before every draft league game. It's going to sound like a crazy idea, but I promise it's really fucking good. Mine is Ether by Nas. It's a really fucking good song. It's incredibly homophobic and really like problematic, but it's a really good hype up song. And it's a ridiculous song. I would never listen to it in any other context, but it's a genuine hype up song. So find a song that speaks to you, that can hype you up, and play it before you play. I know it sounds fucking crazy, but do it. Like it genuinely has a psychological effect on you that is really positive. Thing number two, in terms of just remembering like how to not to be nervous, I feel like being really nervous is tied up when you don't have like, I guess, sequences already planned out in the team building process. So if you're like building a team and then you enter a game and you haven't mocked, or you haven't like thought about what your dedicated lead is, or what your desired first turn is, or what your win con is, your nerves are more likely to take over and start making these weird reckless plays. But if you have a team build that is very textbook and very, okay, this is step one, this is step two, this is step three, you might be really nervous, but you shouldn't stray away from those steps because you've tested them and know that they're going to work. So if, you know, you are on team preview and you're really nervous, at the very least, you don't need to make any decisions during team preview other than just leading with your dedicated lead. And you should know what to do against like what they lead against you and all of these things. So nerves and team building, like planning, are correlated, because if you're just building in a reactive way and throwing out a lead without really giving it much thought, those nerves could take over and you could get taken advantage of in the early game a lot easier because of those nerves being taken over. Whereas if you have the lead in the first 2 or 3 turns planned out towards a specific end game, no matter how nervous you are, you shouldn't stray away from that. So that's really important it's another reason why having like really pre-planned team building is useful, including mocks. Like mocks are incredibly useful too. But yeah, anyone can beat anyone. Have a hype song and team build in a way where you don't have to make decisions early on. And you should be doing that regardless of how good your opponent is. Not necessarily not decisions early on, but like, you know, where you don't have to think as much because you've already thought out the scenarios. Yeah. Discord link expired. Oh god. Alright. I will send a little Discord. One sec. Invite people. Copy. How is that? But yeah, have a hype song. Hype songs are really important. Fourth thing to remember is this. This is gonna be 5 parts. Fourth thing to remember is this. If you are playing someone who's like really well known and is like really good, and like say like the general community considers better than you, there is much more burden on them to win than you, which sounds crazy, right? Because it's like you want to win the game and you're scared because this person's really good and like, oh, that's really scary. But ultimately, if you lose to them, everyone's gonna be like, yeah, all right, it makes sense. If you beat them, everyone's gonna be like, oh my god, it's crazy. Whereas, you know, if someone who's like regarded really highly wins, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, they won, obviously. But if they lose, they're like, oh my god, they lost. So there's much more pressure on like really like reputable players to win games. Whether that pressure truly gets them or not is player dependent, but that is a real thing. Like if you are in a situation where you feel like you're playing someone who has a lot of hype behind them, recognize that the pressure is more so on them to win than for you to lose, or for you to win. Like there's just less expectations, and you know that could help mentally going into things, knowing that you know there's more pressure on your opponent to win than you in those circumstances. Fifth thing I'll just say that's just finally worth bringing up is, what is it? Oh, I had it in my head and I forget it now. Team building, hype song, more pressure on the opponent. Oh, I'm blanking on the last one. Last thing would be, I don't remember. Shoot, my bad, y'all. If I remember, I'll try and bring it back up. But should have written it down or something. But yeah, those are just some pieces of advice that are worth keeping in mind. Yeah. Oh, yes, the last thing, of course. It's not really a solution, but it's something to be mindful of. As you just win more, you will get used to like playoff nerves and things like that. Once you get your first chip, like those things will go away, and just be reassured that that's true. Okay. I feel like I've somehow plateaued in terms of EV skills, and ooh, is the music out? The music is out. We're going right from the top, baby. Actually, no, we'll do part 2 because we're cool like that. But we got to make through Ben and Jerry's advertisement first. Great job, Ben and Jerry's. All right, let's go back to the team building screen. Fucking Ben and Jerry's. Hilarious. And Amazon. Wonderful. Oh, baby. Okay. Let's get this music going. All right, time to answer some questions. I'm going to kind of try and rapid fire through some of these because some of these are repetitive. I feel like I've somewhat plateaued in terms of... So this is from Maya. I feel like I've somewhat plateaued in terms of EV skills and don't know where to focus on next. Currently for offensive bonds, I'm just EVing to outspeed most of whatever I can, max out attack, and then use my bulk calculator for the remaining EVs. And defensive bonds, I more often than not just max out on the side I'm using them to cover, which is your typical thought process when you're doing more to obscure EV values. So the first thing, like... So Maya had this like EV calculator that like calculates like the point in which like the HP value, investment, and defense investment sort of reaches a point to where like the smallest number of EVs can get used and the most amount of bulk can be achieved, which is useful. But it's also, again, like I was talking about earlier, important to be mindful of what is actually genuinely going to revenge you. If only physical attackers are going to revenge you, it doesn't matter what balance you strike between your HP and your defenses. You should put all that bulk in defense. Whichever defense it's gonna, you know, fucking whatever set it's going to run, right? So if you're only gonna get revenged by a Noivern, right, you just put it all in Spadaf for your, I don't know, your Weavile. That's a terrible example. For your Greninja. So you just want to, like, you know, sometimes EVing, you just have to like think about, okay, what hits are you realistically taking? If you're only taking like physical hits that are revenging you for these offensive bonds, then just throw your investment in defense. Defensive bonds are a bit more tricky. Defensive bonds are more than often just max out the side I'm using them to cover, which is typical thought process when you're doing more obscure EV values. So there's two parts to this. Number one is sometimes, believe it or not, it's okay to just run max. That's okay. Like in some circumstances, the team might just be really like physically, you know, offensive, and you know, you might have something like a Toxapex, which is like a dedicated defensive bond, and you're just dedicated for it to be switching into, you know, Gengars and, you know, I don't know, Lilligants and stuff. I don't know. I'm just thinking of random special attacking mons. You would just max out HP and Spadaf. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't think immediately that a 252 spread is bad if a mon is, you know, if a mon is a dedicated special, you know, defensive pivot or a physical defensive pivot, just have an EV spread like this. Obviously, you know, there might be a scenario where you might want to creep something a little bit, whatever, but like it's okay to just max out a stat. You sometimes don't need to go more complicated within it than it already is. But if you are doing a more complex EV spread, again, it's just about what hits are you taking. So, you know, we can go back to this. Like, this was a defensive EVing for me. I wanted to make sure that I lived a Ice Beam from, what was this? This was the other matchup. Let's find the other one again. Okay, here. So this one, I wanted to make sure that I was living a Ice Beam from Curum, right? And that's fine. Player from Zera, it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm always going to die to two. One's going to break through multi-scale and then the other one's not. And it doesn't matter because I'm just going to, you know, click scale shot after I get hit with one and then I'll outspeed the next time. Crocodile, same thing. After multi-scale, I take a Stone Edge even with the negative defense investment. Like, I don't need to worry about, you know, physical hits from Kartana, Zera, Crook, because regardless, like, I'll scale shot, I'll Oko them, whatever. Like, but in terms of the special defensive investment, I want to make sure I lived Curum because Curum was a potential lead that could have just attacked me. I want to make sure I lived Diancie. Diancie was a potential lead that could have just clicked Moonblast against me. Sobra could click Ice Beam. So I wanted to make sure I had the investment to take those on. So it's really about just being mindful about what you could genuinely get hit with, as opposed to just trying to EV for quite literally everything. I know it seems overwhelming, but ultimately, like, if you team build in such a way where you're like really thinking about stuff, like, ultimately all your mons aren't going to be like in front of, like, you know, the entire draft. You know what I mean? Usually if you're building in a balanced way, you're going to find, you know, your I'm going to only find this Eldegoss in front of, you know, this Latios or this Coco. So why should I bother EVing for a +2 Iron Head from Excadrill if this is not my Extra Lancer? This is my Extra Lancer, and this is my Extra Lancer. Why should I bother EVing for a +2 hit from Tyranitar when I have Melmetal and I have, you know, Choice Scarf, Landorus, Speed Dragon Dance set? You know what I mean? So oftentimes, you know, it's just about thinking what realistically is this mon going to be in front of, as opposed to how can I EV to cover everything? Because you can't EV to cover everything. And if you try to EV to cover everything, you're going to have a suboptimal EV spread. So keep that in mind. Yeah. You just really got to consider what's going to be in front of you. If you like draft on paper but aren't vibing with it during the season, what's your approach to finding good transactions? Good question. So I don't think I have the full team in front of me, but I'm going to use my UPBA team as an example. This was my first Wi-Fi season ever. I initially had a Talonflame on it, and I had a Milotic on it, and I had, I think maybe I had a couple other mons that I wasn't vibing with. I had a Vileplume. I love Vileplume, but in this team, it just wasn't working. I loved it on paper, but in this team, it just wasn't working. And my issue with this draft, which, you know, has Mew and Terrakion and all this stuff, was that I felt like I was being forced to build, you know, not necessarily build reactively. Like, I had Scarf Terrakion, I had Weakness Pulse Mew, I had Wincons, but I felt like my defensive pieces, like Rotom Wash, or like Registeel, or like Milotic, were too passive. Like, especially Registeel plus Milotic, like, these are two very passive mons. This was, I think, before Milotic got Flip Turn. Maybe it did get Flip Turn, but oftentimes I couldn't fit Flip Turn. Milotic is a mon that other people use well, I don't use very well. Like, so my issue with this draft in particular was that I felt like my defensive pieces were losing too much momentum for me, and I felt like they couldn't dish much back. So I had to sort of, like, reorient my team in a way where, you know, I basically said to myself, okay, how can I patch that issue? So one is identifying the issue, right? Is the issue your offense, or is the issue your defense? Is the issue that you don't have any good Scarfers? Is your issue that you don't have any good dedicated leads? Is your issue that you don't have any switch-ins to, like, X type or something like that, right? Think about that. So one is identifying what's been going on. And even if it, you know, on paper, you might have resist to a certain type, or you might have, you know, Scarfers or whatever, if you're finding through the team building process that you're not able to bring them for whatever reason, trust the team building process telling you that, as opposed to, you know, whatever it looks like on paper telling you that. So ultimately, the biggest trade that I made was I had a Zerg tree as well, which I was never bringing. Ultimately, the biggest trade I made was I traded Milotic for Starmie, which made the team a lot more offensive. It gave me some speed, so I was struggling with revenge options as well. And just, yeah, try to put on mons that are radically different from the mons that you currently have, and think about what way you can change the direction of your team, right? Are you struggling with the pacing of your games, right? Do you feel like your games are too hyper offensive? Do you need more bulky mons that slow the game down? Do you feel the opposite? Do you feel like the games are getting dragged on so long that your opponents find openings, and you need to find, like, mons that are more offensive? You know, you can still use the same 6-7 mons you have in a draft and change 5 of them and change the direction that your team goes. So my team changed from a very sort of defensive team that relied on stuff like, you know, Resto, Chesto, Weezing, and Rest, Sleep Talk, Registeel, to a team that, you know, played much more offensively with, you know, Nasty Plot, Rotom Heat, and a Jetpack Roserade, and Choice Band Terrakion, Weakness Policy Mew. So you really want to think about changing the play style as opposed to changing the individual bonds. That's something to really consider throughout transactions. Yeah, consider that. Consider what ways you could change the playstyle direction of your team, as opposed to, oh, I don't like this mon or whatever. Really consider what you're struggling with, consider what you could have otherwise had to, like, patch those issues, and go from there. Yeah. Also, just, like, if you're not vibing with a mon, you're not vibing with a mon. Like, get rid of it. During the actual process, what I like to do is I like to say, okay, these are the mons that I really like. I'm keeping them no matter what. And it might be the case that all the mons you've decided that you don't like are all like weak to grass. And all of a sudden you have this team where all the mons you want to get rid of are all weak to grass. It's fine. What's most important is that you have a team that you like as opposed to a team that on paper looks really good. And ultimately, like, you might be able to find a grass resist in your Mew or your, you know, or your, I don't know, your Guzzlord or something. You know what I mean? Like, even though those aren't literal grass resists, like, you'll consider, you know, what grass types I'm actually facing for the regular season, you know, so do I need to worry about that? You know what I mean? So don't think about like the checkboxy sort of stuff, especially reactively. Don't think about like, oh, where's my fairy resist? Where's my ground resist? Where's my X, Y, and Z? Think about like more so like, what are the mons I'm not vibing with? Let's get rid of them. Now let's look at what's left and say, okay, here's the current playstyle that what the team wants. How can I add more mons that shift the pacing of my teams or make the team building process easier or give me roles that I didn't otherwise have before? So, yeah. Okay. How do I use draft order to get minimally sniped? I don't know if I have a good answer to this. I want to say like, I mean, the only thing that I ever do is I just assume people are good at drafting, which might be a mistake. But like, you know, say, you know, I want to get Ursaluna and everyone has a ground type already. I'm going to save Ursaluna until the last draft pick. And then, you know, pick the mon that is much more urgent for the team. So that's thing number one. It's like identify what everyone else has and be realistic about really, are they going to pick up this mon? I don't think so. And leave it, you know, and get a lower tier mon. But more importantly, that's like one piece of advice, but it's not consistent. Like oftentimes, if that's the mon that's best for your team right now, pick it up. And that's the second piece of advice, which is just pick the mon you most immediately need. And you need to identify that every pick, right? Which is, okay, I can pick up, I'll just use, what was a team that was like pretty good? CGC, right? So like I had like AG Slash and Finny and stuff and whatever. Like, I think I picked up Crobat round 3, which is really like weird, right? Like Crobat's probably not a round 3 pick, but I needed that speed because my first picks were AG Slash and Finny. So even though I didn't think Crobat would go until like round 5, Crobat going was devastating to my plan. So ultimately, I get the mon that is most useful for the team. Don't worry about other people unless you're in those later round picks where like, you know, you can really know that something's not going to get picked up. Pick what is the most urgent thing for your team, because that's important. And you also want to make sure that you are getting the thing that, you know, has the least impact, you want to make sure that you're picking up the mon that would be the worst snipe, I guess. Right? So if you're looking at this and going, well, you know, this is a cool mon on the board, but if my Stunfisk gets sniped, this entire draft is fucked. Draft Stunfisk, you know what I mean? Don't worry about something else. Like, pick up the mon that is the most urgent for your team. So that's the one thing to consider. Yeah. Okay. I usually have backup picks. I think backup picks are a little weird. I actually have never, in the last like 2 years of drafting, I've never like given anyone backup picks because all mons are different. And I think it's kind of rough to like equate like one for one, like, oh, like I'm going to get like Milotic, but if Milotic is sniped, I'm going to get a Azumarill. Like Azumarill and Milotic are two completely different mons. So like what you want to do is you pretty much just want to say, what's the most immediate next pick for my team? I'm going to get it. Like don't be tricky with it. Don't try and like, you know, game the system. Just pick up the mon that's best for your team at a given moment. Unless you're in those later round picks where you can look at your, you know, opponents and say, okay, like no one's gonna pick up like, you know, Diancie because everyone has a fairy and, you know, it wouldn't make sense on any of their other teams or whatever. You know what I mean? So, or they don't have the points for it, you know? So you can make inferences in the later rounds, but in those starting rounds, like rounds 1 through like 7 or 8, like pick up the next most immediate mon that's most important to you. It does not matter if you think it's going to get taken or not. Unless you're like, you know, pick number 2 and you only have one person between you and like, you know, you're deciding like which one should I pick first. Yeah, but even Milotic and Vaporeon like are not the same mons. Like they do different things and involve very different game plans. So, you know, I think it's a mistake when people are like, well, I'm just going to make my backup, you know, the worst version of this mod. You can consider like mods in a completely different direction. When I have left backups, you know, just to keep the draft moving, I've essentially just made 2 plans where I've said, okay, my next pick is Neolego. But if Neolego gets taken, like, give me that Necrozma that's still there. Even though, like, Neolego and Necrozma are 2 completely different mods, like, you know, for me to then say, like, oh, I'm gonna get Glamora instead of Neolego, like, those are 2 completely different mods. Like, why would I ever get that? So, you know, don't just get the mirror mod. Like, think about what mods are the maximization of the best possible pick that you can get. And don't settle for like a budget version of the mod you're going to pick next round. Just pick the next mod that's best for your team. Yeah. I still think it's a mistake to do this. I still think it's a mistake to say, oh, you know, I'm going to get Suicune and I'm going to get Milo and Suicune are 2 completely different mods. Suicune is a mod that is like an endgame cleaner with like Calm Mind and, you know, a phaser with like Roar and stuff like that. Milo takes sits and like clicks Recover, and like, you know, Milo switches into things that Suicune doesn't. Milo has a ton of recovery, Suicune doesn't, right? If you have a team that doesn't have any recovery, Milotic is really useful, but Suicune is not. Suicune's not useful at all. So I still think it's a mistake to say, oh, because this mod has been taken, my immediate next best pick is the worst version of the mod that's just taken. I think it's important to look at alternative routes and say, okay, well, what other directions can I take my team other than just getting the, you know, shit version of the mod that just got sniped at me? I think that's a mistake, but I'm just being snobby at that point. Don't just slot 1-for-1 mods in the drafting process. How do you take care of yourself after a loss? What are some ways you can build yourself up after a loss when you're feeling shitty about yourself? Well, it's a tough question for me to answer because I never lose, but although to be fair, it's true. I haven't lost a game in nearly like over a month. But when I do actually lose a game, well, it depends on the game, right? Like, if you got hacked, if you feel like a lot of shit happened, didn't go your way, if you feel like there was a lot of stuff out of your control, and those things happen, like, honestly, like, I said it in the last Draft League Academia, like, you never lose just to hacks, you never lose just to RNG, because there's always something you could have done better, and there's always something you could reflect on in terms of what you could have done better in hindsight. And those reflections are really important, but what's most important is taking care of yourself. Don't force yourself to immediately think over a game once it's happened if you're not feeling great about it, because you're just going to become bitter and resentful about mons, and that just makes you feel worse about the game. Best thing that you can do, thing that I literally do, I have like my bed literally right here, like next to me where I record. That's a thing. If I lose a game and it sucks, I literally just lie in bed for 15 minutes and like chill on my phone and like just get back to reality and say, okay, I lost, whatever. And I'm gonna digest it later, and I do digest it later. But if it was a good game, sometimes I want to theorem on it, and sometimes I want to like go through the end game and say, oh man, I could have done this, and I could have done that, and I could have done that. So it really depends on the quality of the game. Never really like give yourself a set routine for any loss. Really just like follow where your gut is. I mean, as someone who, you know, wants to get better after every single game, I do want to take a moment and analyze what happened, where I could have made improvements in the team building process or the playing process. But that doesn't mean you need to do it immediately after. Ultimately, building yourself back up is less about telling yourself that like, oh, you're okay, like it's fine, like, you know, we all lose sometimes. Like, it's more so just saying, all right, I lost that, move on to the next one. And I know it's easier said than done, but just recognizing that, like, in the grand scheme of things, one game doesn't mean too much at all, and you know, you just move on to the next one. Can't really do anything about it, and that's one of those things. Just the more you play, the more you get used to it. You know, I've put in hours and hours and hours and hours of prep for games and gotten throttled in the actual game itself. My first game in the Smogon tournament, I put in a ton of prep. I probably put in more prep for that team than I've put in for any team since. And I lost because I lost a timer. And I just didn't know the timer was on, and I got timed out. And it happened, and I said, wow, that fucking sucks. I just wasted all that time and I lost a timer. Can't get that time back. Now I know. Lesson learned. And I just, like, didn't think about it. I digested the game with my friend Zazo, like, 2 days afterwards, and I was fine. Fine now. You just move on. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's really the only thing you can do. But just follow your gut and follow your brain. And, you know, if you need to step away from screens, if you need to close out of Discord, like, don't feel bad about doing that. Like, go take a rest, go make yourself some food. Like, it happens. Like, don't feel like you're obligated to immediately, like, you know, figure out what you did wrong or something like that. You can always save that for later. And oftentimes it's beneficial to save it for later because you can see things more when you've fully stepped outside the game. And even when the game's over, you're still kind of in the mentality of the game until you've really readjusted. So, you know, just be mindful. Take care of yourself. Did I completely, like, fuck up the cam? That's hilarious. Ha! Alright, 1 second. I just noticed that. 1 sec. Wow. That's so fucked. Alright, hold up. There we go. No one said anything. Come on now. There we go. See, unfortunately, it doesn't really go for a reason. Thanks, Addy. Losing is fun. Here we go. Alright. Oh, that was so silly. Alright. Well, now you know what my bed looks like. Is all, you know, mushed around. It's completely fucked up right now. So, yay. Let's do a couple more questions, but my voice is starting to hurt, so I want to make sure I'm taking care of myself. How do you know what Pokemon pair well with each other? Short answer to that one is just you got to think about them covering each other's weaknesses, but their their offensive weaknesses. So, you know, what is switching in on those mons, and can they pivot out and pivot into another mon that takes advantage of those mons? So we were talking about Meowscarada and Iron Treads. Meowscarada, you know, U-turns on the Steel types, U-turns on the Poison types, U-turns on the Fairy types, and Iron Treads comes in and deals with those. And then the mons that come in on Iron Treads, say like, you know, Bulky Waters or something like that, they both switch on and Meowscarada comes in on. So that's a really good core, that's a really good pair. Defensive pairs are another thing that's useful. Yeah, go back to the end of the last Drop League Academia VOD, and I go into more depth about that. But you really want to less think about, you know, cores. I think cores are stupid. Don't think about Fire, Water, Grass. Don't think about Fairy, Dragon, Steel. All mons are different, and you can't lump them into categories like that. You just got to think about, can I find a mon that takes advantage when, you know, my mon can pivot out on them. And it's not just pivots, you know, there's defensive mons, right? Do I have a defensive core that, like, really covers a lot? Eldegoss Slowbro, like, covers a ton defensively. Regen cores like that are really great because they just swap back and forth and heal a bunch of, like, recovery. But, like, also, like, in this league, I drafted both Tapu Fini and Azumarill, which sounds crazy, but, like, that's a Pokemon pair that works well together because typically there's only, you know, one mon that beats the Water Fairy type. So if one is dedicated to beating that one mon and then the other one doesn't have any counters afterwards. So, you know, there's you know, benefit to having mons that are really similar to each other as well that work together. So you just gotta theory it out. What's your favorite set of mine that put in work? I don't know. This isn't really the Razor show, but I guess the Garbodor with the ring target. How do you identify win cons, and how do you go about building a team around it? Already talked about that a little bit, but identify the win con, then identify the opening, then figure out how you piece it all together. That's how I do it. Why do people draft a Mungus when Vileplume is 6-7 points cheaper on average? Are they stupid? Good question, actually, which is kind of like a broader fundamental question that's important to ask about Draft League, which is why pick up a mon if there's a cheaper version of it. And typically the answer to that is just that mon is better, but ultimately it's a good point. Like, there's a lot of mons in the lower tiers that do the same thing that mons in the higher tiers do, and budgeting is a real thing. So I would never pick up a Mungus. That's not true. Maybe I would. I don't know. Like, it depends what you have, right? If I had like a really bulky team with a regen core, then I'd absolutely pick up a Mungus over, Vileplume. But if I had more of the balanced team and I was just looking for a grounded poison, then Vileplume is 100% better, because Vileplume and a Mungus both fill that grounded poison role, but Vileplume does it for cheaper. So it really depends on the type of team you have. Like, that extra points is just because, the extra points for a Mungus as opposed to Vileplume is because a Mungus works really well in conjunction with other mons. But if you don't have those other mons, then it has just as much value as Vileplume does. So, it's just dependent on the team. What mistake do you constantly see people do in this new gen? The mistake I constantly see people do is what we were talking about before, which is building reactively. I think some of the best items this generation, I think last generation, like Leftovers was a good item, Citrus Berry was fine, Rocky Helmet was a good item. I think those items are still good and have their places this gen, but ultimately this gen more than ever is about gaining speed control. And if you're faster than your opponent after you hazard stack them, you just win the game. So the two, like, strongest items outside of boots, obviously, in the game, I think, are Choice Scarf, which makes sense, right? You want to be able to outspeed your opponent, and Custap Berry. Custap Berry, I think, is huge this gen, because you have so many mons like Ursaluna, you have so many mons like Iron Hands, you have so many mons like Hisui and Gudra that are, like, offensively quite strong and slow, but still dish out huge hits. And Custap Berry on any of these mons can be fucking massive, because you can, like, trade 1-for-1 and then immediately get a surprise hit off with Custap. So this isn't me saying people aren't using Custap. That's not necessarily criticism. The criticism is just that people aren't building to click their move first in any given turn, or gain that speed control over their opponent. Because ultimately, a lot of the strong mons this gen are like Chi-Yu, I guess Chien-Pao counts too, Chi-Yu, or Bundle, or Valiant. I mean, these mons are great because they can boost speed. They boost your speed, and that's what makes these mons so insanely good, among other things. That's why Booster Energy is one of the best items in the game as well. I mean, Booster Energy is probably also top 5 item in the game. But, like, just things that boost speed make mons in this generation really, really good. So playing to that, Choice Scarf, Booster Energy, Custap Berry, really considering how you can make sets that always outspeed or revenge something. Because I've seen games where, like, Booster Energy Speed Valiant comes in and it just wins because it outspeeds the entire team. So you want to make sure that you're building, sets that stop those types of sets. So Endure Red Card, Endure Custap, AV sets that are just guaranteed to live one hit from, a Chi-Yu and then KO it back. Like, really just, like, winning those 1-for-1 games, as opposed to, like, trying to, like, try and win with, like, like Corviknight, or, like, just, like, fat defense. Like, I've seen these, like, weird Corviknight, like, Alamomola teams and stuff on, like, teams with, like, Sneasler and other strong mons, and it's like, why are you dragging the game out that much? Like, literally just fucking win the sack race. And that's what people should be trying to do. They should be trying to win the fucking sack race, because otherwise you're just gonna get fucking clobbered on by all the offense this gen. right, I'm gonna do one more because my voice is giving out. How's the team tour going? That's not the question I'm gonna go for. Actually, I'll answer the like joke, not the joke questions, but like the smart questions first. How's the team tour going? It's good. I'm in finals right now. I'm playing someone who I played earlier in the season. I beat, so that's really reassuring. Although they're using a different team this time, but it's going good. I won my playoff game against someone named Zooch, which ultimately led us to have a 4-4, 4 wins, 4 losses against the team that we played, that my team, Zero Fox Given, played in semifinals, and then a tiebreaker happened. I didn't play in the tiebreaker. Our 3 best players played in the tiebreaker, and we ended up winning 2-1. So we moved on to finals, and now we're playing the top seed in the league. We were the 2nd top seed, and we haven't played any games yet, but we're in finals right now. I've had 4 wins so far and 1 loss. My 1 loss was the first game I played, which I lost a timer, even though I think I would have won that game had the timer not been a factor. So
one sunroof.
Hey, it's been going quite well.
Holders,
oh my gosh, there's an ad.
Heated seats, which came in very handy after realizing you were never that.
Okay, cool. Fucking heck. Okay. But yeah. Also stop going brain dead and bringing boots every week on a Rocks Week Mon. Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, it can be useful sometimes. Like, but recognize when boots are useful. I've seen people team build and just immediately slap boots on the Mon without giving it any consideration at all. Like, Weavile, for example. Like, I see so many people run, like, boots Weavile, and it's like, Weavile with boots is, like, not great. Like, Life Orb Weavile is cracked. Banded Weavile is cracked. Protected Pads Weavile has a place against Rotom matchups like Lumberry or things of that nature, you know what I mean? So, loaded dice now is like a real thing that Weavile could use. Yeah. Anyway, team tour is going good. 4-1. I'm in finals. We haven't played any finals games yet, but I've been loving my team. The one thing that's really sad is since replays are gone, I was going to make a whole recap video showing the games, talking about the team building process, explaining what a team tour is. And it was so cool because all the games that I've played so far, I think, have different styles of building, different styles of play. I played hyper offensive, no switch offense games. I played sort of like, I played a trick room team, or sorry, I built a trick room team to win one of my games. I did sort of a fatter, like, balanced type build as well. Like, I've done a lot of different styles of play, and since the replays have all been snapped, they're all just gone, so I can't do the recap anymore, and it makes me really, really sad because I was really excited to do it. So some of those games are the ones I was using as the examples and some of the earlier questions. But I am really sad about that, and I'm sad the replays are gone. It's like, why have they only been backed up 4 years ago? How do I make Corey love me more? No clue. Favorite set I had during our battles? I just gotta say the Spinda, man. Like, that shit was so unbelievably fucking good. I've never seen someone use Spinda that well. I think you also used Thunderous Therian very well, Vox. That was cool to see. I think you had a Thunderous Therian sweep, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Okay, last question is from Orange. How do you reflect on a game? We all want to improve, but how do you learn from the games you play? Is it really simple as I played bad or I prepped bad? Oh, you kind of answered this, how to handle a loss. Yeah, so it's how to handle a loss, obviously. Like, take time for yourself and don't feel like you immediately need to like analyze. But when you are analyzing a game, what you should do is you should really analyze turn by turn and say, you know, was this the best play I could have made? Was there a better play I could have made? You know, look at a mid ground and say, was there a point where I could have played more aggressively, put myself in a better position? Recognize when, try and figure out when the game shifted, where you need to start making, you know, different plays than you were in order to get back into it. It's really just about analyzing that replay and thinking about alternative routes to victory that you could have seen that you just didn't in the moment, and that helps you just conceptualize games. But really, like, using replays to your advantage. Like, they're a tool. They're not just a save for people to watch. Like, you go back and watch them, and you think about, what could I have done here? What could I have done there? Could I have made a double here? You know, could I have made a better mid-ground? Like, and that type of shit makes you an immediately better player. Reflecting on your replays. It doesn't have to be immediately after you play, but just reflecting on your replays is huge. And then like, that is 1,000,000% better than like talking to your opponent after a game. Like, just knowing how to analyze replays, and trying to figure out faults in your play. And it's possible that you made a play that turns out fine, but it's possible you could have made a better play. Also, knowing the difference between blunders and inaccuracies. That's like a term that's used in like chess quite often, where like blunder is like you're actively making yourself lose, and accuracy is like you're making a play that like hurts you, or like your opponent could have taken advantage of but they didn't. Recognize, try and figure out what those moments are where you made a blunderous play, where you could have made something else that was objectively safer and more fulfilling or more rewarding. And just inaccuracies, things, where the play worked out fine, or maybe it just was sort of a no consequence came out of it, but you could have done something to take advantage of the opponent, and a play that they would have made or something, right? Where you could have made a double, that would have been safe. So really analyzing replays, that's the biggest thing. And like sit and call with a friend, like try and find a friend who like is better at mods than you. We all have a friend who's better at mods than you. Like there's always someone in the world who's better at mods than you. I could just sit in call, or it doesn't even need better, just someone who's decent and can like find things that you wouldn't otherwise find. Because when you're actually in those games, or when you have the matchup in mind, you can't really see from that outside perspective. So like getting someone else to look at those replays is really important too. One of the least useful things is after a like game ends and then you're bombarded with like 5 people telling you, oh, you played bad, you could have done this, 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 and this, like 10 seconds after you end the game is not very useful or helpful. And some people in this community do that, and it's really fucking stupid. Like fucking step back, take your break, get out of the zone, and then re-enter and analyze the replay. But you have a second question. I have friends who are super into ladder/VGC. I've seen some ladder goons go into DPL and the like without playing draft before. Are there any skills from other metagames or skills you can build on when not playing draft to improve? I don't know, because I don't play other metas. I think VGC obviously has a place. Like we saw that with Wolfie when he came into singles, in terms of just conceptualizing team builds and things like that. But I wouldn't know personally. What I do know is that like laddering helps a ton of people. Laddering helps draft league players figure out how to be better players, and that's really useful, because when you're laddering, you don't know your opponent's sets, you don't know much, but you're just conceptualizing end games, and conceptualizing end games is just so crucially important. But ultimately, like draft league more than anything comes down to team building. And there's people who ladder and just use other people's teams, and they're good players, but they're really shit team builders, and they don't really team build that often. So like there are skills from draft that apply to the ladder and other things like that. So like team building, counter teaming a meta, or counter teaming an opposing team, or something like that. Draft's super useful in that. But in terms of just being a good player, figuring out how to conceptualize endgames, knowing when a strategic sack is worth it or not, those are all things that are useful on the ladder. The ladder is also really useful because it allows you to test run different styles of play, right? It allows you to try, HO teams that you wouldn't otherwise be able to try and draft. It allows you to try really stally teams that aren't as common in draft. Like draft kind of cuts out the really extreme offenses and the really extreme defenses sometimes. So it's nice to be able to play those extremes and figure out new ways that you can innovate in draft, because there's definitely unexplored and untapped ways that draft is useful. Like I remember that I laddered for a long time. Wow, I just fucking hit my nail and that hurt. Whoa. Okay. I remember I laddered an OU team, and I think it had 3 dark types on it. It had like Weavile, Chronon, and something else. It was literally just Darkspan. It was the team. I think it had Hoopa on it as well. And it's like you would never draft like those 3 mons in draft, but maybe you should. You know what I mean? If it works in ladder, maybe you should. So it's a place where you can be more experimental. And I've seen people come from ladder and come from VGC and apply those, thoughts to draft, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and that's okay. So that's it. All right. We've been streaming for nearly 2 hours, so I think I'm out of it. But thank you for coming, and hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this is enjoyable. Hopefully this was informative. I appreciate you all. Big announcement. I'm coming back. So we are starting up PPL again, and that means that I am going to be playing Wi-Fi again. I haven't played any Gen 9, leagues since last PPL, but I at least am a little bit less rusty, and I'm less rusty, and I happened to, play in a really high competitive league, even though I was playing Gen 8. I just still have I have better concepts. I'm better at sequencing things. Like, I'm going to be better next season, and hopefully do better than I did. Because even though I made it to semis and stuff of the PPL, I wasn't very proud of my performance. Like, I could have done a lot better if I really put my mind to it. It was some of the least prep I've ever done for any draft league games, in a long time. So I really want to put in the effort to PPL and really try and win, because I think I can. So that's me coming up pretty much after the new year. I think we start drafting a couple days after the DLC drops in a little under a week. So stay tuned for that if I don't do any streaming from now until then. But that's the next thing on the agenda. So PPL is back, Wi-Fi games are back. Hopefully y'all will enjoy that, and it'll be fun. But take care, everyone. Have a good night. Sweet dreams. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Don't get bit by, the little bugs creeping in your bed. You don't want that. That's not great. All right. Have a good night, y'all.